I've only told this story once before, and even then I left parts out because it sounded too insane to believe. But if I'm being honest, every time it rains at night, I still can't sleep properly. It happened 7 years ago, but the memory hasn't dulled, not even a little. It was the summer after I graduated college. I was 24, had just moved back in with my parents, temporarily, and I'd started delivering groceries part-time for a local app service while I looked for a more permanent job. It was easy work. Drive, deliver, drive, repeat. But that night changed something in me. I live in upstate New York, real quiet towns, the kind where people don't lock their doors and deer wander across the street like they pay rent. That evening it had started raining pretty hard. One of those late summer storms where the sky turns greenish gray and thunder rolls across the hills for hours before the first drop even falls. I remember thinking I should call it a night after my last delivery, but then a new order popped up, double the pay, way above the average. It was an ASAP order, too, marked urgent. The address was listed as Old Ridgetop Road, which already sounded like the beginning of a horror movie. I'd never delivered there before, but I figured, screw it, it's just groceries. I accepted. The drive up to that address was strange from the start. The GPS kept glitching, rerouting me over and over again like it couldn't make up its mind. It sent me off the main road and onto this narrow, winding path lined with trees that looked like they hadn't been trimmed in decades. The rain was now coming down hard, blurring my windshield, even with the wipers on high. I almost turned back, but the app said I was less than a mile away, and the payout kept tempting me. Besides, how bad could it be? Eventually, I reached a long gravel driveway that sloped upward through the woods. No lights, no sign of any house from the road. I remember thinking, who the hell lives out here? But curiosity overrode common sense. I pulled in. The gravel crunched under my tires as I made my way up, my headlights slicing through the sheets of rain. After maybe 2 minutes of crawling along, I saw a structure, an old house, barely lit from the inside. It was large, Victorian style, but clearly worn down. The kind of house you'd expect to see in a black and white photo from the 1800s, with stories about people going missing. Still, I was here. I grabbed the brown paper grocery bags from the back seat and jogged up to the front porch, trying not to slip. The porch light was flickering, and there were wind chimes made of bones, or at least something that looked like bones, dangling just above the door. I hesitated before knocking. The door creaked open before I could even touch it. A woman stood there, mid-60s, stringy gray hair, pale as chalk, wearing an old wool sweater despite the humid air. She didn't say a word, just stared at me, eyes wide, like she wasn't expecting me anymore. Like she'd forgotten she even ordered something. A delivery for... I started, but she cut me off with a slow nod. "Come in," she said, her voice dry and rasped, like she hadn't used it in weeks. "I can just leave it here, ma'am," I offered quickly. My gut was screaming not to go inside. I don't know what it was exactly. Something about the way her hand trembled slightly, or how she kept glancing over her shoulder into the darkness behind her. She didn't respond, just opened the door wider, and then I heard something inside. Not a TV, not a radio. It sounded like whispering, fast, overlapping voices coming from a room I couldn't see. The kind of whispering that doesn't stop when someone walks in. "I really should go," I said, taking a step back. The woman's face changed. Her eyes narrowed, and she whispered something under her breath. Her lips barely moved, but the way she said it chilled me. "They get angry when they're hungry." "What?" She looked past me, toward my car. "You shouldn't have come in the rain," she muttered. That was it. I dropped the bags right there on the porch and turned to leave. But when I looked back at my car, I froze. There was someone, or something, sitting in the driver's seat. I hadn't left the doors unlocked, I'm sure of it. The headlights were still on, illuminating the figure inside just enough to see that it wasn't moving, just sitting, head tilted downward like it was waiting. I felt my stomach drop. I ran, but not to the car. I bolted into the woods, not even caring about the mud or the rain. I had no plan, just get away. From her, from the house, from whatever was in my car. I didn't stop running until I saw a break in the trees and the dim glow of a farmhouse in the distance. I ended up pounding on their door, soaking wet, barely able to speak. The old man who lived there let me in, gave me a blanket, called the sheriff. By the time anyone made it back to the house on Ridgetop Road, there was no house, just overgrown woods. No gravel driveway, no woman, no groceries on the porch, no trace of anything. I know how this sounds. I do. I sat in the back of the sheriff's car, shivering under that scratchy farmhouse blanket, while he drove me down Old Ridgetop Road. Except it wasn't Old Ridgetop Road anymore. The GPS wouldn't recognize it, and even though I could swear I followed the same path back, everything looked different. There was no gravel turnoff, no trees with wind chimes, no gate, nothing. Just a winding rural road with nothing on either side but brush and a distant tree line. I kept trying to explain it to the officer. I told him about the woman, the house, the figure in my car. He didn't say much, just nodded now and then, and kept one hand on the wheel like I might bolt out at any moment. Eventually, he pulled over at the spot I knew the driveway had been, got out, and walked around with his flashlight. Still nothing. No tracks, no tire marks, no sign a house had ever been there. He asked if I'd been drinking, asked if I took anything. I told him no, and I was dead serious. I hadn't touched a thing all day except coffee and bottled water. Eventually, he said maybe I had gotten lost in the storm, that my mind played tricks on me with all the thunder and rain. "It happens," he said. "People see things." But I wasn't buying it. You don't hallucinate a whole damn house. He dropped me back at my car, which had been found a few miles down the road, parked neatly on the shoulder like I'd left it there on purpose. There was no sign of anyone else having been inside, no fingerprints but mine. But the strange thing, the driver's seat was soaking wet. The windows had all been up, the doors locked. There was no way rain got in, and that smell, like wet soil and old pine needles, it clung to the upholstery for weeks. I drove home in silence, shaking the whole way. After that night, I took 2 weeks off work. I couldn't bring myself to take delivery routes anymore, especially not in rural areas. My sleep became broken. I'd wake up thinking I heard whispering outside my window, or I'd see a flicker of movement at the edge of the woods behind our backyard. My parents said it was stress. My sister said maybe it was PTSD. I don't know. But something had followed me. Not physically, I never saw that woman again, but mentally, spiritually, like a part of me had brushed up against something I wasn't supposed to see. I tried doing some research. I scoured message boards, asked in a few local Facebook groups if anyone knew of a house up on Ridgetop that fit that description. Most replies were jokes or ghost story references, but one woman messaged me privately, said she used to live nearby back in the 80s and remembered a strange, reclusive couple who lived in a big old house up there. The man was a taxidermist, and the woman, well, she said the woman used to talk to the dead. She said the house had burned down in '91 after a lightning strike during, you guessed it, a summer storm. That area had supposedly been cleared and left to grow wild after that. No one rebuilt. There was even a newspaper article she forwarded me. Black and white photo of a charred Victorian frame, half sunken into the earth. It was the same house. Every part of me wanted to believe that what I saw was a trauma-induced dream, a leftover image from some buried newspaper photo I'd maybe seen in childhood. But I knew better, because that whispering I heard inside the house, I still hear it sometimes, not often, only when it rains. The last time it happened was 3 months ago. It was around 2 a.m. I woke up to a hard downpour and got up to close the windows. As I passed by the mirror in the hallway, I paused, because I heard something behind me. Not footsteps, not creaking floorboards. It was the same whispering voices, layered, fast, like they were trying to say something all at once, but not quite forming words, and reflected in the glass, standing just behind my shoulder, was that same pale woman, only for a second. I turned around instantly. Nothing there, but the air. It smelled just like that night. Wet earth and pine needles. I haven't told my family about this, not all of it. I don't want them to think I've gone off the deep end. But some part of me believes I brought something back with me that night, when I entered that house. I shouldn't have stepped onto that porch. Shouldn't have taken that job. Shouldn't have ignored my gut. People always think ghosts are about old cemeteries or cursed objects. But sometimes, it's just a place that remembers. And sometimes, if you're not careful, it remembers you too. My cousin Rachel disappeared on a rainy night in Washington back in 2019. She wasn't a reckless person. She didn't party, didn't do drugs. She was quiet, responsible, and always told people where she was going. That night, she was just going for a short drive to clear her head, as she told her roommate. It was a Thursday, overcast, a light drizzle that picked up into a heavy downpour by nightfall. She didn't come home. They found her car 2 days later, abandoned at the edge of the forest preserve just outside Snohomish. The keys were still in the ignition. Her phone was locked inside the center console. The driver's side door was open, like she'd stepped out and left it that way. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, but her umbrella was still in the trunk. Rachel hated getting wet. That detail haunts me the most. The official search lasted 8 days. Cadaver dogs, helicopters, volunteers, nothing. They didn't find her body. No clothes, no footprints. The ground was too muddy. Any tracks she might have left were washed away by rain within hours. Eventually, the sheriff's department ruled it a missing persons case. The story dropped off the local news, and most people moved on. But I didn't. Rachel and I were close. We grew up like siblings. We'd spent every summer camping, hiking, exploring trails. She knew those woods. She wouldn't have wandered off blindly, and even if she had, it wouldn't have been without her phone or her coat or locking the car. There's something else, too. 3 nights after her disappearance, I had this dream. I was lying in bed and suddenly everything around me went pitch black, like the room just dissolved. In the dream, I was standing at the edge of the same woods where her car was found. I could hear the rain falling, but I wasn't getting wet. Everything felt off, like I wasn't really awake or asleep, somewhere in between. I remember looking into the trees. It was dead silent. No wind, no birds, no bugs, just silence. Then I heard her voice. Software calling my name. Matt. Matt, I'm cold. I swear to God, it sounded just like her. But the voice didn't come from in front of me. It came from beneath me, like the ground itself was whispering. I woke up drenched in sweat. My feet were muddy. I'm not kidding. Mud on my sheets, under my toenails. I hadn't even left my room. I told myself it was a nightmare. that I must have walked around in my sleep or something. But when I went out to my car the next morning, I found a small smear of dirt on the driver's door handle. Rachel's old bracelet was hanging from my rearview mirror, the same bracelet she'd been wearing the night she vanished. I didn't go to work that day. Hell, I didn't leave the house. I locked all the doors, pulled the curtains shut, and sat in the living room staring at that bracelet. My mind kept racing. Was someone messing with me? Had the police found it and somehow returned it without telling me? That didn't make any sense. Rachel's personal effects were still officially in evidence. I called the detective on her case, asked him directly. He sounded confused. Bracelet? No, we haven't released anything. Everything we have is still logged. I didn't say anything else, just hung up. The next night, it got worse. At around 2 a.m., I was woken up by a knocking sound. Not on the door, on the window. My bedroom window, which faces the backyard. It's on the second floor. There was no wind, no branches nearby. No animals could have reached that high. And yet I heard it. Slow, measured, 3 knocks. Pause, then 3 more. I didn't move at first, just listened. Then I did the dumb thing, you know, the horror movie, kind of stupid, and walked over and pulled the curtain aside. There was no one there, but pressed against the glass, right in the center, was a handprint. Small, feminine, muddy. Rachel's hand was small. She used to complain she couldn't hold heavy mugs or open jars by herself. I knew that print wasn't mine. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, the handprint was gone. I hadn't cleaned it. I didn't clean it. It was just gone. I tried to tell myself I was grieving, that my mind was playing tricks. But deep down, I felt something different. Like she was trying to reach out from wherever she was, but not in a comforting way. Like she was stuck and pulling me toward her. I took a break from work, told people I was burned out, but really I started digging. Maps, trail reports, local legends, missing persons reports from the area going back 20 years. And what I found chilled me. Rachel wasn't the first person to go missing in those woods, not by a long shot. There were 7 other unsolved disappearances in that area between 1996 and 2018. All women, all vanished within a 5-mile radius of the forest preserve. Same profile, alone, nighttime, wet weather. Most were never found. One was, well, part of her was. A hiker found a woman's foot still inside a hiking boot, just sitting beside a stream bed. The rest of her was never located, but none of that ever made the news. Just small mentions in old police blotters, family message boards, and a couple local forums. The deeper I dug, the more I found people whispering about a legend, something old. A name kept popping up, the Hollow Girl. According to some of the local accounts I found, she was a settler's daughter who was killed in those woods in the late 1800s. Her parents had gone mad during a harsh winter and did things to survive. They say she wandered the forest, starving, hollow-eyed, calling out for help even after she died. She calls the lonely ones, one message board user wrote, especially during rainstorms. I thought it was bullshit at first, urban legend stuff, but I couldn't shake the coincidences. The rain, the handprint, the whisper in the ground. Then something happened that shattered any doubt. 3 weeks after Rachel disappeared, I was reviewing trail cam footage near the edge of the woods. I'd placed a few of them after getting permission from a nearby landowner, just hoping to catch anything strange. At 1:14 a.m., in one clip, there was motion. The camera clicked on, and there she was. Rachel, wearing the same jacket from the night she vanished, walking barefoot through the brush, her head tilted at a strange angle, like her neck couldn't support its weight. Her arms hung loosely at her sides, and then suddenly she stopped and looked directly at the camera, straight into it. Her eyes were completely black, not pupil dilation, black, no whites at all. Then she opened her mouth, and a static scream filled the audio feed, so loud it nearly fried my laptop speaker. It didn't sound like her voice. It sounded like something trying to be her voice. Then the footage cut out. When I went back to the SD card later, the entire clip was corrupted, unreadable. I don't know what happened to my cousin that night. I don't know what she saw or what took her. But I know she's not dead, not in the normal sense. I think she's stuck somewhere between worlds, and something out there is wearing her skin, looking for someone else to drag back. So if you're ever alone on a rainy night, and you hear a voice calling your name, don't answer, even if it sounds like someone you love, especially then. This happened to my Uncle Brian in 2014. He was doing long-haul truck routes across the Midwest, the kind of guy who could drive all night without blinking. The road was his life, and he never scared easily. But after that one night at a roadside motel in Nebraska, he never traveled alone again. It was late October, cold, wet, and dead quiet. He'd been driving for almost 16 hours straight through heavy rain, and finally decided to pull over near a no-name exit off I-80. There was only one motel in sight, a rundown place with a flickering neon sign that just said, Rooms. No brand name, just that. Brian said the front desk guy barely looked up, just slid him a key, and told him room 6 was at the end of the hallway. The motel was almost empty, maybe one other car in the lot. The rain was relentless that night, and the wind howled like a living thing. When he got to his room, everything inside felt off. Not dirty or creepy, just too quiet. You know how sometimes you walk into a place and immediately feel like you're not supposed to be there? That's how he described it. He tried to sleep, but couldn't. Something kept waking him up. First it was the sound of water dripping from the bathroom, even though the taps were off. Then around 2:30 a.m., he heard a knock. Tap, tap, tap. He thought maybe it was the wind at first, but it came again. Tap, tap, tap. 3 soft, deliberate knocks. Not at the window, at the door. He got up, looked through the peephole. There was a woman standing there, soaked to the bone. Her hair was plastered to her face, her arms hanging limp at her sides. She wasn't moving, just standing there with her head down. At first he thought she might be in trouble, maybe a victim of domestic violence or just lost in the storm. He opened the door a crack and asked, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't respond, didn't even flinch, just stood there. Then she raised her head, slowly, and he saw her face. Her eyes were completely swollen shut, her cheeks pale and bloated like she'd been underwater. Her lips were blue, trembling, but no words came out. Instead, she began to cry, not sob, just silent tears pouring down her ruined face. Brian slammed the door shut and locked both bolts. He backed away, heart racing, and grabbed his phone. No service, not a single bar. He told himself it was probably a drug addict or someone having a mental episode, but deep down, he knew something wasn't right. Then the knocking started again. But this time it wasn't soft. It was furious. Bang, bang, bang. 3 hits. Then silence. 3 more. Like she was trying to break the door down, but still not saying a word. He turned off the lights, crawled into the corner of the room with his pocket knife and waited for it to stop. It went on for hours. But when the sun came up and he finally worked up the nerve to peek outside, the hallway was completely empty. Not a drop of water, not a footprint, like no one had ever been there. He checked out immediately. The guy at the front desk was different. A younger man this time. When Brian mentioned the woman, the guy just looked at him and said, "You were in room 6, right?" Brian nodded. That room's supposed to be locked off. A woman drowned herself in the bathtub back in '98. Guests kept seeing her, crying at the door, so we stopped renting it out. Brian never said another word, just left. To this day, he won't drive at night if it's raining, and he never stops at roadside motels. After my Uncle Brian had that horrifying encounter at the motel in Nebraska, he couldn't shake the feeling that something followed him home. It wasn't just the memory of the woman's silent cries or the eerie atmosphere of the motel room. It was the unsettling sense of being watched. He tried to brush it off, telling himself it was just an overactive imagination. After all, he had been awake for almost 30 hours and had driven through heavy rain the entire night. But that feeling, it lingered. Weeks passed, and Brian went back to his usual routine. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on work or life back at home, every time the weather turned stormy, he'd get that feeling again. The one that sent a cold shiver down his spine. Like someone was standing just behind him. It became impossible to ignore. One evening, after a long day on the road, he decided to stop by a small diner on the outskirts of a town in Wyoming. He needed to eat and stretch his legs. As he stepped inside, the air smelled of old coffee and grease. The diner was almost empty except for an elderly woman sitting at a corner table. She looked up as he entered and immediately smiled, her crooked teeth showing under her wrinkled skin. She motioned for him to come sit across from her. Brian hesitated, but something about her calm demeanor made him feel at ease. He walked over and sat down. Without skipping a beat, the woman asked, "You're the one who saw her, aren't you?" Brian froze. The hair on his neck stood up. He'd never told anyone about that night. It was too strange, too terrifying to share with anyone. But this woman, how could she know? "You've seen her," she repeated, her voice slow and knowing. "The crying woman at the motel." Brian tried to force a laugh. "I don't know what you mean. I've just been on the road a lot." The woman's eyes darkened. "I've seen her too, many years ago. She's been following people for years. You might think it's just your mind playing tricks, but it's not. She's still out there." Brian's heart raced. He didn't know what to say. "How do you know about her?" he asked, barely able to keep his voice steady. The woman leaned in, her eyes fixed on him, her hands trembling slightly. "I used to live near that motel. I remember when it happened. People said it was suicide, but I think she's still looking for something. She lingers in places where no one dares to stay too long. She doesn't hurt anyone, but she'll never let you forget her." Brian sat there, unable to speak. What was this? Was this woman connected to the nightmare he'd experienced? Or was it just some bizarre coincidence? Before he could ask any more questions, the woman stood up, her frail hands clutching her cane. "You'll see her again. Just make sure you're never alone when you do," she said, her voice fading as she walked toward the door. As she left, Brian felt his phone buzz in his pocket. He pulled it out, and to his surprise, he had service. He hadn't had a signal in the diner before. He checked the time. It was just after midnight. But when he looked up, the diner was empty. The woman was gone. The more Brian thought about that encounter, the more it unnerved him. What if that woman knew something about the spirit of the motel that he didn't? What if he was in more danger than he realized? That night, after he finished eating, he drove out of town, back to the highway. But as he passed the area near the motel, he saw the same flickering sign in the distance. His heart skipped a beat, and his hand instinctively gripped the steering wheel tighter. He couldn't help it. His curiosity was gnawing at him, but so was the memory of the crying woman. He never went back to that motel. He never drove down that stretch of road again. But sometimes, on stormy nights, he still feels the cold weight of eyes watching him from the darkness. He says that when it rains, he can hear her, the soft, silent cries just out of reach.